Ethan scoffed at ghost stories. He preferred logic to legends. Ghosts were for the gullible, not for him. He believed in facts, in evidence, and there was no evidence for ghosts, or so he thought. Ethan lived in a small town called Black Hollow. It was a place where shadows seemed longer, and secrets whispered on the wind. The town was old, its history etched in the very stones of its buildings. But it was the woods surrounding Black Hollow that held the real fear. Deep within those woods lay Widow's Hollow, a place named for a grieving widow who, according to legend, took her own life after her husband died in a mining accident. Locals claimed she haunted the hollow, her mournful cries echoing through the trees. Ethan, of course, dismissed these stories as mere folklore. Black Hollow was more than just a town. It was a crucible of fear. The air hung heavy, thick with unspoken anxieties and the weight of generations past. The houses, mostly old and weathered, seemed to huddle together as if seeking comfort from the encroaching woods. And then there was Widow's Hollow. It was a scar on the landscape, a place where the trees grew twisted and gnarled, their branches bare even in the height of summer. The air within the hollow was perpetually cold, and a thick silence hung over the place, broken only by the rustle of leaves or the snap of a twig. Stories about Widow's Hollow were plentiful. Some said the widow's cries could be heard on moonless nights, a mournful wail that chilled the blood. Others spoke of strange lights and shadows moving within the trees, glimpses of something not quite human. Ethan, however, remained unconvinced. To him, Widow's Hollow was simply a place best avoided, not out of fear, but out of respect for the natural world. It started with a dare. A group of Ethan's friends, emboldened by youthful bravado and too much soda, challenged him to spend a night in Widow's Hollow. They knew his skepticism was a point of pride, and they saw an opportunity to test his resolve. "Scared, Ethan?" taunted Jake, his grin a mocking challenge. "Afraid of a ghost story?" Ethan, despite himself, felt a flicker of annoyance. He wouldn't let them see him back down. "Fine," he said, his voice firm, despite the tremor of unease in his chest. "I'll do it." The dare was set. Ethan would spend a night alone in Widow's Hollow, armed with nothing but a flashlight and his own skepticism. As he walked towards the looming darkness of the woods, the setting sun casting long, eerie shadows, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a terrible mistake. The woods grew darker as Ethan ventured deeper. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, seemed to press in on him, stifling his breath. The last rays of sunlight disappeared, swallowed by the dense canopy of leaves overhead. An eerie silence descended. The usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of small animals, were absent, replaced by an unnatural stillness. It was as if the woods themselves were holding their breath, watching him. Ethan pressed on, his flashlight beam dancing nervously ahead of him, illuminating the twisted branches and gnarled roots that seemed to reach out towards him like grasping claws. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own footsteps, each one echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, the air heavy with an unseen menace. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint and indistinct, carried on the wind. He stopped, holding his breath, listening. It came again, a low murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Ethan shone his flashlight around, his heart pounding in his chest. There was nothing there. He told himself it was just the wind playing tricks on his mind, but the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. He continued on, his pace quickening. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, swirling around him like a chorus of disembodied voices. They seemed to be calling his name, taunting him, drawing him deeper into the heart of the hollow. The whispers reached a crescendo, morphing into a gut-wrenching wail. Ethan stumbled back, his heart pounding against his ribs. And then he saw it, a figure, shrouded in shadow, materialized in the dim light of his flashlight. It was tall and gaunt, its form indistinct, but Ethan could sense its eyes fixed on him, burning with a cold, malevolent light. The figure glided towards him, its movements silent and effortless, like smoke on the wind. Ethan stood frozen, paralyzed by terror. The wail intensified, seeming to tear at the very fabric of his sanity. He wanted to scream, to run, but his body refused to obey. Suddenly, a surge of adrenaline shot through Ethan's body. Breaking free from the grip of fear, he whirled around and ran. He didn't dare look back, the chilling wail echoing in his ears, urging him onward. Branches whipped at his face, tearing at his clothes, but he didn't slow down. The forest seemed to conspire against him. The trees closing in, the shadows reaching out to grab him, but he kept running, fueled by pure terror. Finally, he burst out of the woods and into the relative safety of the open road. He didn't stop running until he reached the outskirts of town, collapsing on the side of the road, gasping for breath, his clothes torn, his body trembling. The next morning, Ethan staggered home, his mind reeling from the experience. He tried to explain what he had seen, what he had heard, but words failed him. How could he possibly describe the indescribable? His friends, initially skeptical, were taken aback by his appearance. He was pale and shaken, his eyes wide with a terror they had never seen before. Something had changed in Ethan that night. He was no longer the confident skeptic. He had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had looked back. The whispers, the figure, the sheer terror he had felt. It was seared into his memory. Sleep offered no escape, for the whispers followed him into his dreams, twisting them into nightmares. The haunting of Widow's Hollow didn't end with Ethan's escape. A darkness had settled over Black Hollow, a palpable sense of dread that permeated the very air. The townsfolk, once dismissive of the legends, now whispered in hushed tones, their faces etched with fear. Ethan, forever marked by his experience, withdrew into himself. He couldn't escape the feeling that something evil had been unleashed, that the Hollow had claimed not just his peace of mind, but a piece of the town itself. And he knew with chilling certainty that he would never be truly free of its grip. The disappearances started a few months later, hikers vanishing without a trace, their cars abandoned on the edge of the woods, a young couple last seen walking hand in hand towards the looming darkness of Widow's Hollow. Each disappearance fueled the growing fear, confirming what Ethan already knew. The Hollow was no longer content with whispers. It was hungry, and it was taking what it wanted.